Hey guys, it's Baban, and today we're going to have a look at how we can vary up the shapes that we use when we're drawing bodies a little bit. Because it can be quite easy when you're drawing in whatever style you're drawing to focus more on drawing the body and making it look correct rather than getting a bit more diversity with the shape in there. So we're going to have a look at how we can bring in a little bit more diversity to the shapes that we use and how we can adapt it to use it for different styles or whatever style that you particularly have. Okay, so here's a little sheet where I've been messing about just before I started, so I've got a few examples here already, but what we're going to do is start a new layer and we're going to start off with the process of getting this sort of result. Now when we're drawing stuff, like I said, we can tend to get a little bit stuck in what we are drawing, thinking of it as a body and trying to make sure that it all makes sense. But that can usually end up with us making boring shapes and repeating the same shapes. So what we're going to try and do is just focus on the shapes before we try and make anything with them. And that should give us a chance to have a bit more fun and be a bit more out there with the shapes that we use. Okay, so what do we think when we draw a body? We think, right, we've got the top part here, we've got a head, the neck, got the bottom of the body, and we've got the legs and the arms. Okay, so that's how I draw a really quick body, like completely not thinking about it, not trying to add in too much detail, just to basically make a stick figure and make the shape. If we want to make some characters that are a bit more interesting rather than just the basic shape, how should we go about that? So, like I said, what we want to do is not think about it as a body, we want to think about it as shapes. If we think about really, really basic shapes, we've got a circle, we could have a square, we could have a triangle, like this, or triangle like this. And these are the basic shapes that you're going to be using, or that you're going to see a lot. But once we've got the basic shapes, what we can also do is start to stretch them. So by having these 4 shapes, we've also got a lot of other different ones that we can make with the shapes just by stretching them. Have this shape. If we stretch them all out like this, or we can stretch them sideways like this. Let's make them dumpy. And you can see already we've already got a big variety of shapes. You can see the basic way that I've drawn this body. We tend to split the body up into 2 parts. So we've got basically the rib cage and where the pelvis is. And we can either, say, take one of these shapes and move that over there. We can either take one of these shapes and make that the whole size of the body. Is that the whole size of the body? Or we can take 2 different shapes. So if I take maybe a circle for the top, and let's pick a triangle for the bottom. So we can either have this one shape for the body here, and these are going to start looking a bit weird, but it is just playing with shapes really quick. We don't want to concentrate too much on making it look like a proper body that makes too much sense. We can either have one big shape like this, or we can have 2 of them and combine them together for the top part and the bottom part like this. Join them together in the middle, and then add some legs. And you can see already how with just these simple shapes we've got a lot of stuff to play with. So what I'm going to do now is go and build some shapes, put some together in a little sheet, and then we're going to go and fill them in and turn them into characters. Okay, so the first 2 body shapes we're going to look at are the basic default for male and female. So we should all know that males have wider shoulders and thinner hips, and females have wider hips that are usually, in the ideal figure, about the same width as the shoulders. So we want this sort of shape here and that sort of shape there, so we need to figure out what shapes we want with them. So what we'll usually have is an hourglass made out of 2 triangles like this, and then with the male we'll have these triangles here, and then sort of a square for the pelvis. So then this would be the rib cage, this would be the pelvis, and you can see if I just join these together, block out the shape, I've got this little dint in the pelvis for where the hips are, and I'm not following the shapes exactly, it's just giving me a bit of an idea of where everything should be. So I'm just going to block it out really quick just to show you the general sort of shape, and then we'll do the female one. And like I say, you can go and block these out a little bit. They don't have to be as blocky as you do them with the shapes, but it's just easier to tell where you want to put things. So you can see already how there's a difference between male and female, and you want to keep that in mind when you're using the other shapes as well. But you don't always have to stick to it. I think it's good to have a mess around with all the different shapes. But if you want to accentuate that the character is male or female, you usually go more towards these sort of shapes for either of them. Okay, so let's move on to some other ones using the other shapes. Now, first of all, we're going to have a look at just using one shape as the whole body instead of using the 2 shapes. So this will be for like really, really cartoony figures. And later we're going to have a look at combining 2 shapes into one full body shape. But at the moment we're just going to have a look at these, see what we can turn these into. Now I am going to keep these pretty close to the shapes that they are. And regardless of which shape you've got, you should be able to turn them into something. So these are just going to be really cartoony because they are just dead simple shapes. So this fella's looking a little bit penguiny. Like short and round, like a chubby little penguin. And the more cartoony it is, the more you can really mess about with proportions. So, you know, I've got short little legs, he's got quite long arms. So we're going to do the square one, and I'm gonna make the heads the same sort of shapes as the bodies, because that'll bring out the shape even more. So because he's really square and blocky, we're going to make his arms sort of bigger and blockier, a lot more angular shapes. And these are going to look quite dumb when you're doing them, but that's sort of the point. You've got to mess about with the shapes and make them look dumb before you can figure out how to use them correctly and make interesting shapes and decisions with them. And with more cartoony stuff, this doesn't necessarily even have to be the body type, this can be with the clothes as well, because it's sort of like working with silhouettes. But we're just going to do it with body shapes right now because that's what we're focusing on. And again, in these 2 you can see when both these triangles are simplified, we've got one that looks more male and one that looks more female, so that's probably what you're going to go more towards with these shapes. But like I say, it's fun to experiment and see what other sort of shapes you can use in different characters. And I'm quite a fan of little dumpy legs, probably because I have little dumpy legs and everyone draws stuff that looks like them. Okay, so we've got 4 really simple ones there, and I'm just going to go and fill these ones in as well. Now these ones could be a bit more realistic because they're stretched out, they sort of fill what would look like 2 regular spaces that I talked about, where the body's split into 2. So it's like they're both of them merged together. So instead of having the 2 shapes like this and then having to draw the in-between, we've just simplified it down to this shape. So we've got all these tall, thin shapes, and we can just mark it out simply like that. And because we're thinking with shapes, we're not focusing too much on getting everything perfect, because we're just messing about, seeing what shapes we can use. And we're focusing more on the shape than actually putting in too much detail. So you can see I'm just using really swoopy lines that aren't perfect, just to build something really quickly instead of thinking too much about adding detail. If we want, we can even block stuff in like this. We don't really need to do it with lines. If you want to be someone who blocks in silhouettes like this, that's also a good way of going about it, because you can do it a lot quicker than using lines. Now, because all of these are quite long and stretched out, I'm still keeping them cartoony, so they're all sort of looking a bit gangly. And I'm going to do the rest of these like this. And again, we're not following the shape exactly, we're just sort of using it as a guide for where things are wider and where things are thinner. So we're not relying on it as much as we did in the last row. Like I say, you can simplify it as much as you want. Make the shapes as weird as you want, because it is just figuring out what looks right. How much you can bend stuff and how much you do want to bend stuff with your style. Okay, so we've done those with the basic shapes and some of the basic shapes a bit more stretched out. Now we're going to have a look at building some with two shapes. Okay, so we're going to take the top halves of the body and we're going to do some top halves of the body, and I'm going to change these shapes up a little bit, because you can also, you don't have to use a perfect triangle. You can make the edges curved just to make the shape a bit softer, or stretch it out like this. And we're gonna go with one of each shape again, and we're gonna mix it up on the bottom. And we can also change the size. So if we make this pelvis a bit smaller, if we make this one larger and stretch it out to the side a bit. With this one, let's make it a little bit smaller and round it out to fill that in. Okay, so because these are a little bit more segmented, these are going to look a lot better if we do something a bit less cartoony, because the more simple it is, the more cartoony it's going to tend to look. Okay, so the first one, we've got a nice big round chest. I'm going to draw these a little bit more to the side so that we can see the shape of them. First of all, I'm going to join these up like this, and let's make this a dude. We'll make this a dude, because he's got quite square hips like this. So I'm just going to join these up, and by adding in this centre line, you can tell where the centre is. I'm just going to bring his chest out a little bit more, because it does look sort of big and round and bulky. And the next one, now this one looks a bit more female to me. And like I said with the basic shapes, with the male on this one, it looks more male because it's wider at the top than it is at the bottom, so it's a sort of inverted triangle shape. But with women, it's more that sort of triangle shape. So we can see that the hips at the bottom here are wider than the top, and we've even got this wider at the bottom, thinner at the top, with the top of the body. So I'm going to mark out the middle line. We can maybe add a little bit in and make it quite chubby. Start blocking out the shape, and again you can see I'm not following it exactly. We'll make these arms just a little bit closer in, because we still want that sort of triangle shape in the front. And with this triangle shape as well, with the breasts, they sort of add to that shape where it's larger at the bottom. Okay, and because we've got this shape going on, this sort of triangle shape where it's wider at the bottom, I'm going to make the legs wider at the bottom as well. So we're going to continue the shape that's going this way, and we're going to add the legs in so that they reflect that as well. And this next one again still looks female to me, because it's closer to what we think of as stereotypical ideal female figure, so that's how we're going to fill this one in. And you can see in these last two, a lot can be expressed not just in the shapes that you use for the top and the bottom of the figure, but also in how you join them, because in this one I've made it more rounded to add a bit more weight, but in this one I've pulled it inwards to make her look a little bit more thin and dainty. Again, I'm going to try and carry on this shape in the legs, so it's going to get wider around the hips, and then I think it'll peter out more towards the bottom. So the legs and the feet will be smaller. And this one again looks more male, because again it's more blocky. So we're going to give him a little bit of chub, because he doesn't look really as buff as the first one, because his hips are a little bit wider, so when we're joining that up it looks as though there's maybe a little bit of pudge there. Okay, so there's some that are a little bit more realistic in proportions, but you can clearly see the way that we're using these shapes to mess about with the figure a little bit and give us some interesting shapes that we might not normally have used. So we've gone from very, very simplified, just using one shape, to using one simplified shape as the whole figure, to using two shapes to create a bit of a combination, using different sizes and warping the shapes a little bit. And now what we're going to do is, instead of having two shapes different like this, we're going to try getting these two shapes and then meshing them into one shape so that we can simplify them, so that we can draw them a lot easier, like the ones from this line. Okay, so with these next lot, what we're going to do is take these ones that I've just done a quick little sketch of, and we're going to, like we've done with this second row, we're going to take the way that we've used these in two blocks and we're going to turn them into a more simplified shape that is just one shape like this. Okay, so the first one, we're just going to go with this basic hourglass shape. So if I draw out these two triangles like this, and draw out this one, we're going to draw out the shapes first so that we've got a base to draw from, and then we're going to simplify them on the layer above. Okay, so we've got our shapes now, and if I just make this layer a little bit lighter so that we can see better when we go over it. So you can see we haven't really got a middle joined in, so what we're going to do is sort of mush these into the sort of shape we want. So we're just going to turn the two shapes into one shape. So this one's sort of a bit closer together already. But see, we've got this shape that comes around here. And we're just going to make the join that we'd have in the middle part of it. And we can add in that to tell us where the crotch is. Just draw that a little bit better. Okay, so if I just add in some crosshairs to these so that we can see the shape in a little bit more of a 3D sense to help us out. And if I take away this layer underneath, you can see now how by taking these two shapes as the base, we can use them as a guide to make a different shape instead of having to draw the two shapes separately all the time. Now we've just got this simplified shape that we can use. So now I'm going to add in where the arms would be at the sides, and I'm drawing these at sort of a 3/4 view so that they're a bit easier to see. It's a bit easier to understand the shape that we've made. Then we can do the same with where the legs are. I mean, you like I say, you can really make these any gender though. Like if I just put quickly on there some breasts, like these aren't really very good. It's just a really basic sort of 3D, just to block it out. In the arms, and because this one's a bit chubbier, we're gonna make the arms a bit chubbier as well. Legs a little bit shorter on this one because I still like things to be a bit cartoony. I don't like to go completely realistic. I like to have a bit of fun with the shapes. There we go. Now you can see how those start to make a little bit more sense, and they are starting to look a little bit better now that we've designed our own shapes to draw the characters with instead of relying on using two different shapes. And of course, depending on what your style is, how much you want to exaggerate it, shapes can be completely different. So you can see we've gone through this just using straight blocky shapes, just one shape, so it's really, really cartoony. We've got this one where it's just one simple shape. We've got this one where it's a bit more realistic and it's two shapes, they're not too exaggerated. And we've got this one which is somewhere in the middle where we've used sort of both ideas and combined them into making our own shapes to use. So I hope that shows a good range of styles and how you'd use this technique in different styles depending on how you want to work, because you can use it with everything because it is just using shapes as the building blocks. So what I'm going to do is maybe go and do a few more, maybe clean them up, and we'll watch those in a minute. So I've gone and done a little sheet just of a few ones that I've cleaned up a bit more than the others, and I've actually made these into characters so you can sort of see the shapes a bit better and how they might relate to the character that I'm drawing with them. So I've done a line for each of the different styles or the different sort of proportions that would fit with different styles in this, so that you can just see a little bit how it can apply to different styles and how much they're exaggerated or how subtle the shapes can be. And you can see that all I've done is draw the shape, and then I'm sort of drawing the character over the top and making something with the shape. Now obviously you do need to understand how bodies work to actually be able to put all the bulk of the skin and everything and the muscles onto the shape and make it into something, but depending on obviously how simplified your style is, it'll be completely up to you with how much detail you want to put on. But I do need to mention that it isn't just an easy fix doing this. You do actually need to understand how bodies work to be able to turn the shape into a body. So just got a few more. I did quite a few chubby people because you don't really see many chubby people drawn, so I wanted to draw some of those just to add those shapes in because you don't see them very much. Okay, so here's the finished sheet. I went and cleaned it up just a little bit. Now these aren't great, but they demonstrate what I'm trying to show. So after I did them, I went and filled in with this block so we can really see the shape that is underneath the character. So you can compare with it there and with it without. So we've got really simplified ones that are a bit more towards realistic, then we've got more towards realistic again, and then we've got this combined shape that I make that's more my style. And I don't really know what these characters are, I just sort of went with the shapes and wondered what they was. I don't know what this little like chubby man baby thing is, but I don't know, I like him. You can see how with the more realistic stuff then the shapes get a little bit more subtle. Like this top half of his body is larger than his hips, so the difference is there, but it's not as harsh as in this guy here with his sort of triangle shape. And you can tell a lot with the comparison between other ones that we see. It shows that it doesn't have to be really, really obnoxious when you're using these shapes. It can just be really subtle like this. And the ones that are more my style, and that's them. Just a quick little sheet of scribbles, and this is a really good thing to do as a study to just get you thinking a little bit more, but not have you worry so much about making the body look right, just messing around with shapes and having a bit more fun with it. Now, if you guys want to do something like this, I've made a little sheet for you of these shapes. So I'm going to put a link to this in the description where you can download it and you can bring it into whatever program it is that you draw with, and you can just draw over it. And if you do decide to draw over it, then make sure to send me a tweet of what you've done with it. So I want to see what weird characters you come up with, like creepy chubby little man baby. Okay, thanks for watching, I hope this helped. Give us a like if this helped, share if you think it'll help someone else, and subscribe for new videos on Tuesdays. There's links in the description to where I post stuff, where you can commission me, and where you can buy prints of things that I've drawn on Redbubble. There's also a link to my Amazon wishlist where you can buy me art supplies if you want to help me out with it. I hope this helped, thanks for watching, bye bye!